The Agricultural Bank of Namibia has announced a set of COVID-19 related relief and stimulus packages for their clients. The bank has set aside an amount of 200 million Namibia dollars in a loan form to be disbursed to farmers who are affected by the pandemic. Tonight we look at the impact of COVID-19 on the agricultural sector as well as the relief measures to assist farmers. A very good evening and a warm welcome. I'm Denver Kisting and our sign language interpreter this evening is Salma Moses. I'm also joined by an esteemed panel, Mr. Sakaria Nyikembwa, CEO of Agribank. Good evening, sir, and welcome.
Good evening.
I'm also joined by Mr. Daniel Mahua, Executive Manager, Namibia Emerging Commercial Farmers Union. Good evening, sir, and welcome.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Last but not least, Mr. Jason Mvula, President of the Namibia National Farmers Union. Good evening, sir, and welcome.
Good evening, and good evening, viewers.
Mr. Nyikembwa, I would like us to get straight into it. Please talk to us about the submission process involved as far as these relief and stimulus packages are concerned.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. Maybe before I go into that process, I think it's important to just unpack what the package entails.
Yes, please.
So as it says, it's a relief and stimulus package. So there are basically two legs to the package. The first one is a set of relief measures, and I'll talk a little bit about them shortly. And then the second part is the stimulus part, which is really the stimulus loans to induce or enhance production. Now, let me start with the relief measures. But I think overall, before I go into that, what I would like to say is that whenever you are putting together a package like this, you are always having to do a fine balancing act. So on one hand, you are looking at what kind of measures can we put in place and to what extent to assist the farmers, but on the other hand, do so in a way that the bank remains sustainable and that it can help farmers in future as well. And I think that is the fine balancing act that we've had to obviously take into account in coming up with this package. Now, what are the relief measures that we are talking about? One, we have got an installment holiday, and it's an installment holiday for farmers who have been affected by COVID-19. And obviously, because it's a COVID measure, there has to be impact on the particular farmer by COVID-19. We would, of course, look at the motivation of that farmer in terms of how they've been affected. And of course, if the answer is then positive, then the farmer has 12 months in which they do not have to actually pay, this year's installment. So effectively, from 1 June this year to 31 May next year, the farmers who qualify then do not have to actually pay the installment. So what we will then do is that installment plus the applicable interest on that installment, we will capitalize on the farmer's account, and then we will add a year to the loan term of that client. So I think that is the one measure. The other relief measure is we have had to adjust our interest rates. And on different products, of course, we have different interest rates. Effectively, what we have done is to say any interest rate that is over 8.5%, we reduced it by 0.5%. Any interest rates that is between 8.1% and 8.49%, we made that 8%. And anything that is below 8% then stays as it is. So we have a number of products that have interest rates that are quite low. For example, 4%, 6.75%, 7%. So those ones that are already below 8, they remain as they are, but the other ones we have adjusted. Now, when a client is in arrears, there is also a penalty interest that we charge, and the rate is 2% of the arrears. We have, for the relief period, reduced that from 2% to 1.5%. So that is the interest rate relief measure. And I think the balancing act that one must always look at is, for you to give loans, you have to borrow money somewhere. And obviously, you have to pay a rate to the institution that gives you the money. So of course, you might want to give as much as possible, but of course you have a cost of funds that is associated with the money that you borrow, and you must then always make sure that when you lend out, you are able to cover the rate at which you have borrowed.
We heard earlier this week that the last thing that we need as a country is for this crisis to become a banking crisis, and that's exactly what you're addressing at the moment.
Yeah, 100%. But there is then adjustments to the rates, and that will apply to all the clients who have accounts where reductions have happened, and that is basically another relief measure. So there are others where we have basically also introduced minimum conditions, and one of them is the listing of clients who are in arrears on a credit bureau. Now, normally we would expect, before we delist, we would expect the client to clear 100% of their arrears. But what we are saying is, as a relief measure, so why don't you then at least just pay 10% of your arrears, and then we delist you. So instead of 100%, it's 1/10 of that, and then the client is basically delisted.
Thank you.
So I think that is the other one. And then restructuring. So when a client is in arrears, so we can restructure that loan. Our normal requirement is that the client pays a minimum of 35% of the arrears before we consider restructuring, which means we can then consolidate the arrears into the main amount. But what we are saying is, for clients who are not yet at a legal stage, instead of 35, at least pay 20%, and then we will, restructure your loan. And there's something that is important for me to explain. Now, if a client is in a pre-legal stage and they want to just restructure, then it's 20%. If they just want to be delisted, then it's 10%. But if you want to do both, then it's the bigger of those two, which is the 20%. So it is not 10 plus 20.
Not the total, just the bigger of the two.
Is, so it is the higher of those two, which would then be 20%. I don't know how much you want me to go into.
Yes, we'll get into a lot more of the particulars as the conversation unfolds. Okay, but thank you very much for that very comprehensive and elaborate introduction.
Yeah, but that is the relief measures. If we can come back to that a little bit later, I can explain a little bit more. The stimulus part is then the loans. All right, it's to assist with increasing production. So whether that is now for cropping purposes, inputs, irrigation systems, boreholes, or restocking on the livestock side. So anything that helps with increasing production, we will then consider under those. But those are loans. We would have to go through normal credit assessments because obviously at the end of it, the client is required to pay back. But once a client then gets a loan, there is a grace period depending on the production cycle of what they have borrowed to do, up to a maximum of 12 months, and only then after the grace period are they expected to start paying their installments.
Very well. Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Moa, I'm sure many farmers are very grateful to hear about these relief and stimulus measures announced by the Agricultural Bank of Namibia. We do know that everybody has been affected. All sectors have been affected. But talk to us about the impact of COVID-19, particularly on emerging farmers.
Thank you very much. Before I address your question, answer your question, we should be mindful of the fact that COVID-19 is not a standalone element that we should actually address. It comes on the heels of a long, protracted drought under which the farmers suffered. One of the biggest problems that we are facing in the industry is that the livestock numbers has dwindled to the point that is worrisome. Because we have all these lucrative, deals that we have launched with the Chinese, with the Americans, but then do we have the stock to actually meet these quotas? And it's a question that we have to ask. Otherwise, we'll have to lose all these lucrative deals that we have clinched. So, we cannot address COVID-19 in isolation. We have to look at the total picture. Farmers have been hit hard Now, in some parts, in some parts we have received sufficient rains, but we still have the south, and we still have the western part. We still need to give attention to them. So emerging commercial farmers are those farmers, some of them who came from the rural areas, from the communal areas, who bought commercial land through the affirmative action loan administered by Agribank. Now, these are people who have taken out loans and who has been battered by the drought. And drought is actually one of those unknown elements. You don't have control over the climatic conditions. So that is now, in a nutshell, the whole picture, because we cannot address effects by COVID-19 alone, but I mean the industry is suffering at the hands of the drought, as well as the whole spectrum of problems.
Thank you. I'd like to direct your own question back at you.
Good.
You were raising the question about whether or not we have sufficient stock levels to honor these lucrative deals with external partners.
Exactly.
Do we have sufficient stock to honor those deals?
I'm afraid not. I think under correction, we south of the red line, we are challenged. We don't. I don't think us pulling through all these deals, and we need to ignite the sector, and we need to restock, and we need to bring the farmers back on their legs in order to start prospering. So I'm afraid that maybe in the NCA, which is there we need to devise some mechanism in order to bring the stock that is there into the lifeline of the industry. But I mean the stock that we talk about when we are talking about all these lucrative deals of when we talk about China, when you talk about the US, it's south of the red line, but then we need to give attention. We need to pay attention to that.
Thank you very much.
Good.
Mr. Mbula, the NNFU is guided by a number of core values relating to increased food production for households, food security, as well as to enhance marketing of farming products to increase the income of households. So let's please take one slight step back. What were the challenges experienced before the advent of COVID-19 in honoring these core values?
Thank you very much, the moderator. I must say, from the point of NNFU, from the beginning, nothing was working. We have inherited the tendency of not having interest in agriculture. This is way back. So, and I must say, the challenges have been there all along. In terms of, let's start with financing the production value chain, lack of land ownership because of the inequalities inherited from the old dispensation, and then of course the high input costs, and most to say abject poverty of our people. Now, for us to just start thinking that we were on our legs, this does not reflect the truth. We have been struggling all along, and with the COVID COVID-19's onslaught, it's like in boxing, we received a knockout, and we really have to recover from this. This put us in a very precarious situation as a country. Now, looking at the point to say, even before the COVID-19 onslaught, we never had sufficient food in the country. We were relying on imports. And if we are to really be serious and we want to see progress in what we want to achieve in terms of food security, we have to take an anatomy of the whole situation, and for us to understand where did we go wrong and what can we correct.
Where did we go wrong, according to you?
Number one, as I said before, for you to have a flourishing economy, you have to have some factors which are in place. Let me say, for example, bring to your attention that to 70% of our population are depending on agriculture. But yet we are saying the contribution of agriculture to the GDP is only 3 something percent. So it means somewhere there something is wrong, something is not right. So and on that note, I must say there has been a tendency of unwillingness or the dire drive to invest in agriculture. We have been neglecting the sector for all along, and this has killed us. And unless we change our approaches and mindsets, we will not get out of that ditch or hole. The approach which we need to take is to say, let's have concerted efforts, let's sit around the table, throw ideas, and the best idea to be supported by many will be taken, and we take it from there.
Thank you very much. Mr. Nkembwa, we heard Mr. Maua say that the impact of COVID-19 on the agricultural sector cannot be viewed in isolation. We need to be cognizant of the protracted drought of about 7 years. So as you shed light on the application process for both the relief and stimulus packages, please perhaps tell us how the bank would verify, if I as a farmer allege that I have been impacted by COVID-19, that it's not as a result of the drought, because it might be very difficult to prove that.
Yeah, I think you obviously have to look at the facts coming from the farmer. You will be able to also co-verify those facts, and I think you will also be able at the end to make a judgment call on some of these circumstances. So that is what it is at the end. But what I would like to latch onto, which Mr. Mahua spoke about, is that obviously on the back of COVID, you had, last year was probably the severest drought in many years, and in the last 6 to 7 years, you have variable rainfall in different parts of the country that is overall below your long-term average. Not that all regions were affected the same, but you have that, and therefore, I think as stakeholders in agriculture, it's important that we have these engagements, ongoing conversations about the impact of the various factors, especially environmental, on agriculture and production, and what needs to be done collectively to do that. I think different stakeholders are able to do their little bit on their own. So I think Agribank is just one player. Of course, you have farmers' unions, you have Ministry of Agriculture, you have other players that support agriculture, and I think it is important that we do not see this issue of today of COVID in isolation. So I think this is just one instance that we are reacting to, but I think there is obviously bigger challenges that we need to deal with to try and ensure that agriculture makes its rightful contribution to the gross domestic product of this country. And that is true. That is true. But it is not necessarily just something that is an agribank matter. It's not a financing matter necessarily. And it's not a financing matter from one institution necessarily. I think there are a lot of players, and I'm hoping that at least this particular episode of COVID will bring the parties around the table to begin to seriously look at what it is that needs to be done collectively to lift the contribution of agriculture even to levels where it was in 1990, 11% of GDP. If we can get it back to those levels,
Thank you.
then even employment, will actually increase.
Thank you very much. If you want to participate in tonight's conversation, if you have a question for one of the panelists, 061 291 3339. 061 291 3339. Please remember to switch off your television set or your radio to avoid any confusion. Mr. Nkimbo, while you still have the floor, can you please talk to us about the impact of COVID-19 on the operations of the bank, and also briefly touch on, from your perspective, its impact on the sector of agriculture directly and indirectly?
Yeah, I think you see that when farmers who are our clients are affected, of course the bank naturally will be impacted. So when farmers are in a situation where they are not able to sort of honor their financial obligations, then of course it will limit the bank's ability to provide further loans to grow the sector. And I think that is basically, in short, the impact that COVID is having currently on the sector as well as on the bank. And maybe just to demonstrate a little bit further, so if you then provide installment relief, for example, for 12 months, now theoretically, if everyone qualifies, then it means the bank will actually not be collecting anything for the next 12 months. And you need to now look at that and say, how do we balance that with the need for the bank to exist beyond the 12 months and still be there for existing as well as future clients? So the impact will be reduced collections, but I think that is done with a view to providing an opportunity to farmers to be able to be stronger after that period. But that is the impact, for example, just in terms of the one side of the operation.
Very well. We've got Fanuel from Grootfontein on the line. Good evening, sir.
Yes, good evening.
We can hear you. Please ask your question or raise your concern or make a comment.
Okay, my question is directly to the CEO.
Yes, please go ahead,
can you hear
Fanuel.
me? Hello?
Please go ahead, Fanuel. We can hear you.
Okay. How did COVID-19 impacted the new applicants, those that want to apply for loans to start farming, let's say for the first time? And how are the indirect rates, the process of considering now the collaterals, or if someone qualifies the payslip? I just want clarity on that.
Just one moment before you go, Fanuel. Is that question clear, Mr. Nkimbo?
Yeah,
These questions are clear.
The first part is clear. The second part about collateral and interest rates, maybe if you can just
elaborate.
Yeah.
Fanuel, as far as the collateral question is concerned, can you shed more light, please?
Okay. Now, what I want to know is that how are the new farmers, the new applicant, affected by this, by the situation of the conflict? How, is there a new change in the criteria for applying, or are the interest rates, do they change, are they reduced, or do they increase? And considering also the collaterals, or if someone qualifies with a payslip, I just want, is there a new system, or is it still the same, or how exactly is the process going on now?
Fanuel, are you asking whether or not collateral will still be required, yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Nkimbo.
Yeah. Now, all right. Now, thank you, Fanuel. I think in terms of what's the impact of COVID on new applicants, now, obviously, if you have to shift 200 million from what would ordinarily have been normal loans, maybe somebody wants to buy a farm, to provide stimulus loans, so you are having 200 million less. I think that is really the impact. we will still be looking at normal applications. It just means that I think the size of the pot is smaller, especially as people also qualify for the holiday and as collections reduce over the next 12 months. So that is really the impact, the extent of which I would not be able to say now because the proof of the pudding is in the eating.
Yes.
I think as we go along, we will actually know what the uptake is on especially the holiday, and therefore what the collections would look like and what we then would be able to do for new clients that are not COVID related. I think that is one. In terms of interest rates, we do have different rates for different products. Earlier, I was basically just going through some of the adjustments that we've made and that will become effective 1 June. So we have reduced some of the rates, and of course that will be a benefit to both existing as well as new clients. So when the rates come down, then they actually come down for everyone. So we would not have a rate for existing clients and a rate for new clients for the same product. So I think that is a benefit. And in fact, what it means per annum, what the bank will then be foregoing in interest income is about 43 million. But I think it's a worthwhile cause from our perspective.
You also wanted to know about collateral.
Yeah, collateral, we have basically two types of products. We have those that require collateral, and for especially communal farmers, we have also two types of no collateral loans. And of course, those will continue. So those who are in communal areas, no collateral, they can apply for the no collateral loan products. But those who have collateral, especially if you're buying a farm, so the farm by and large will serve as collateral. So those requirements will stay.
Very well. But it also relates to new farmers, so new applicants of these products.
Yeah.
Very well.
Yeah.
We've got Tangeni from Transkalahari on the line. Good evening.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine. I have two questions.
Yes, please go ahead.
Since this COVID-19, there's been an eye-opener on the agriculture sector. And my question is about the green schemes that are not active at the moment. What will be done to them? Are you going to engage the students that have graduated that did agriculture? And my second one is on the tobacco plantation, since it's not yet accepted. Why can't we change that hectare of land, piece of land, into a maize farm or anything?
Thank you very much, Tangeni.
Okay.
Mr. Mbula, I'd like you to please respond to that, and then we're also going to give Mr. Mahwa an opportunity.
I think I didn't follow on the question.
So firstly, he wants to know about the green schemes in light of COVID-19 and what their future would entail, and the tobacco plantation that's being planned, whether or not that should go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for the question. As I said at the beginning, we should at this point in time concentrate more on the activities which can give us better yields and in the short possible time. The choice is ours, where we want to invest and where we think it's going to work for us as a nation. If we think we have to revive the green schemes, maybe we have to start and question what created the failure, what made the green scheme not to work out for us. And if we can address that one, probably then we can then inject new ideas and revamp the whole program, and then say, okay, now we are on the best starting point, let's go.
What's your answer to that question? Why have the green schemes not worked out for us?
There are so many factors. Administration could be one, lack of financing could be one, and probably there are some natural factors cited in I may give an example of Omusese, whereby the operations or the yields were destroyed by the elephants. That's already a setback. But I'm not interested to narrow my mind on only one specific project. But I want us to take the whole operation and say, no, if we do this right and multiply it, then it could really help us to reach good results.
And your view on the future of the tobacco plantation?
I must say that is not really in my line as a department, as a president of an NFU, but I could probably refer to any one of the panels who can say something on that.
Very well. Mr. Makwa, as you respond to the future of the green schemes and perhaps also say why they may not have worked thus far and comment on the tobacco plantation, if you so wish, you also raised the concern about the protracted drought, but we have been criticized over our over-reliance on external factors, including the climate, in the way we conduct agriculture in this country. Just bear that in mind in your answer also.
Yeah, thank you very much. I wouldn't like to go into the green schemes really, but my position is that in every dark cloud there's a silver lining. COVID-19. If we haven't learned a lesson from this, then we won't be able to learn a lesson. We are over-reliant on South Africa, on other countries. We have land, we have water, we have able-bodied human resources, people who can actually work the land. And I think out of the lessons, and one of the challenges also maybe to the government is that we keep preaching that 80% of the Namibian population are directly or indirectly dependent from agriculture. Agriculture accounts to 5% of the GDP, contribution to the GDP. Now it's time to put our money where our mouth is. It's time to categorize agriculture where it rightfully belongs. With the market, with the exports and imports that the borders that are giving us trouble, we are struggling to actually get or import, even foodstuff. What is hampering us from producing our own food, at least our own staples? And this is we have to do a self-searching. And I think as far as the green schemes are concerned, we have to do a post-mortem and actually find out why things are not working. And based on that, we take informed decisions. Because we have the tendency of thinking big projects and one of us just sit in an office and think, if I do A, B, C, and so on, but then the reality, dictates otherwise. So I think we need to be informed by a proper research and a post-mortem of these projects that are not operating, and as a result, then we can build on that. The infrastructure is there. We still have the land. So I think we can do better.
Thank you very much. We've got Kaveto from Nkuru. Good evening.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you, sir. How are you?
I'm well too.
Yes.
Yes, can I go ahead?
Please do.
Yeah, no, thank you that you people are trying to enlighten us in terms of how COVID has affected us. So I only have got some 2-3 questions here, specifically to the CEO.
Yes, please go ahead, sir.
Yes, the first one, talking about the stimulus package, I wanted the CEO to tell us, is this applicable to Namibia as a country or to certain area of Namibia as farming area? I'm referring to commercial farmers as well as us under below the red line or the communal lands. If I happen to explain, I'm referring to this because I have experienced when we were told by the Agribank that something is coming up for the farmers, just in general, but at the end of the day, not all of us are benefiting.
Yes. So I don't want you to preempt his responses. So please get to your second and your third question.
My third question.
Your first question relates to whether or not the stimulus package is extended to all farmers across the country.
Exactly,
You said you had three questions. Yeah.
That is the one.
Yes.
Yeah, then I wanted to hear again, he was talking about on something that is going to be effective as of 1st of June.
Correct.
Is there any time frame for a person to expect his outcome or the result, whether this loan has been approved or not? Because sometimes Agribank things takes almost the whole year. Now here, while we are living now in another situation whereby people are in dire need of something, is there any mechanism to speed up something? That is going to start from the 1st of June until I do not know where it's going to end. Here, I only want to have the specific time frame.
Thanks. And your last question, please.
My last question is the Agribank criteria. Is it different from region to region or are the same? I would like to refer to the Agribank region, office in Rundu, whereby we are struggling a lot. I wanted to hear whether they are having the same criteria when people are securing loans from Agribank offices.
Thank you very much, sir.
Welcome.
I think you quite a mouthful.
Yeah, no, thank you, Kaveto. The stimulus loans, they are applicable to all areas of Namibia, as all our loans are. So, and as I've said earlier, we do have loans both for communal farmers as well as for commercial farmers.
There's no distinction.
So we do not have distinction. I think as long as the client is able to meet the requirements, they should be able to get a loan. So that is one. Two is, I think the thing is always, if the client meets the requirements in good time, then it helps to actually deal with the loan application in good time as well. And we do have approval at different stages, depending on the loan amount. So, and every week we actually have meetings to decide on loans. So if the client submits and the client actually meets the requirements, so depending on the loan, it can be done in a week, it can be done in a month, because even the bigger loans, we do have the requisite governance structures meeting to look at those loans.
Are there applications that take a year or longer?
But it could be. But I think one must always, a year maybe is a little bit overboard. But what you will find is the client does not meet the requirement, or they are asked to provide something. They take a very long time, and when they come back, then they say, my application has taken so long. But sometimes you are actually waiting on the client to put down the requirements. But generally, we try and work as efficiently as possible when all the requirements are in.
Very well. So his last question.
So his last question is whether we have different criteria for different regions. No, we don't. And maybe it would be useful, it would be very nice actually if one is able to get details of these scholars, that one can follow up and get a little bit of insight and be able to address specific issues if there are bottlenecks in a particular office. So
he did refer to the Rundu office.
Yeah, but I would actually have wanted to then be able to talk to him and get a little bit more insights into the specifics of why he came to that conclusion, so that we can actually deal with it and solve whatever the issues are.
While you have the floor, sir, we often hear reports of Agribank being involved in litigation to try and recoup money from defaulting clients. Please touch on very briefly the challenges experienced by the bank prior to the advent of COVID-19.
Yeah, so I think the starting point really is litigation, or going the legal route for us, is the last resort. So when we give a loan to a client, it is not with the intention to one day end up in court, or to one day end up at an auction. So that's not what we want to do. But obviously when you provide a loan, And year in, year out, you do not actually get the client to honor their obligations. Sometimes no arrangements are made. So you have persistent default over many years. Then obviously you do have then to take the necessary steps to try and recover the loan that was advanced. And regrettably, in some cases, you would then end up actually with that legal process.
Very well.
I do not necessarily want to discuss individual cases, but I think sometimes we have been unfairly dealt this hand. But you find a client has not paid anything in the last 7, 8, 10 years and still think that it is unfair to expect that they must pay, or if they don't pay, then one has to take the normal process of recovering that money.
Very well. Mr. Mbula, unfortunately, we need to wrap up. We need to continue these very important conversations.
Okay.
According to some of the figures provided to us recently, we know that about 700,000 Namibians need assistance in terms of accessing food. As far as COVID-19 and its impact is concerned, do we expect that number to increase as you conclude?
For sure. The impact of COVID-19 is very clear and it's so big. So definitely this number is going to increase. And then that's why I said at the beginning, we have to start the planning to make sure that we plan for and we start producing to cover these gaps. As you said, we are about to run out of time. I'm convinced, as the CEO just alluded to it, it's so essential that we as stakeholders and partners, including government and NGOs, we need to come together and plan together. Because if we don't do that and everybody do it in isolation, it creates loopholes. For example, I do appreciate and I do embrace the pay holiday included in the stimulus. Now, let's take, for example, those who are farming in cattle sector. The cattle has got a cycle to produce. So if we take 1 year for that loan, it means at the end of the day, before the cattle the winners are ready for sale, then this period is already lapsing.
Thank you.
So, but hence I'm saying we could cover these gaps by just consolidating and planning together and appreciate what the others are doing.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mahwa, you earlier suggested we need to put our money where our mouths are. What does that mean in practical terms to ensure the sustainability of the agricultural sector post-COVID-19? Very briefly.
Yes. Agriculture is one of the biggest employers. Agriculture contributes that much to GDP. If we take everything away, we are left with the land and the human resources to till it. So what I'm saying is that even in the biggest nations, I was reading the U.S. The unemployment rate was standing at 36 million. So for us, we are sitting with people who are unemployed, who can be, because we need to activate those resources in order to be productive. So what I'm saying is that we need government, we need all of us, we need to revisit our priorities.
Thank you.
And agriculture being one of the priorities, we have to redirect our resources to the priorities.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Mr. Nkimbo, you have the final word.
Yeah, effective 1 June, the package comes to effect. Our invitation is to our clients to visit our offices. We will have applications there. We will have applications online on our website, and we would then invite them to take advantage of that opportunity. I think we have tried to do what is possible within the constraints of the resources that we have, and I think we would like to think that this is at least providing some relief and stimulus to the sector.
How do you think it will aid the sustainability of the sector?
Yeah, it will aid the sustainability of the sector because, one, if you are able to increase your production, at least you grow. And of course, if you have 12 months relief, at least you have an opportunity to at least do something within that period and be able to obviously grow your operations going into the future.
Gentlemen, thank you very much and best of luck. Let's keep the faith. Farming remains very important. The agricultural sector, as we said earlier, not only provides food, but also provides many jobs.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks a lot.
We'd like to thank AgriBank for sponsoring this evening's COVID-19 update. From all of us here at the NBC COVID-19 update desk, it's good night and goodbye. Please stay safe. Enjoy the public holiday tomorrow. Even if you can't go to church, seeing that it's Ascension Day, make use of the safe space of your home and do what you need to do. Goodbye.